today. Dr. Malone, I got so much to go through, and I want to start in the FDA process and let you just run with it. But I got to start with Tony Fauci. He clearly said yesterday, and I think it was a couple times, that it was the fall of 2022. That wasn't a misspeak. He put it out there, and he got blown up, and he had to walk it back. What is this guy thinking about? How can he even? What are they conceiving over their NIH that would make them think that, he said fully vaccinated, not talking about antibodies, not talking about people that have had the disease before, not herd immunity, but fully vaccinated. I think he used the number 90%, right, which means the school kids and the high school kids have to get it. Just that's how the math works. What is this guy, what is he signaling to us?
Well, remember, this is moving the goalpost from 70% uptake, which was what had been the party line for herd immunity. I can't say what goes on in Tony's mind. He just says one thing after another and then flip-flops and then denies that he's misrepresented things previously. I have no idea what's going on in his mind. The truth is that the vaccine data that they're using in the licensure is outdated. The efficacy of this in preventing infection and transmission is poor. It's somewhere under 40% according to the Israeli data. And there's no way that they can get to herd immunity. So that's probably why they've dropped this discussion. If you pick out the nuance in his words, he's using kind of subtle weasel words that allow him to hedge his bets. So he's using really soft language that, we could get in this more under control and these kinds of things. It's very much a contrast to his prior more definitive statements that have all been proven untrue.
Well, he says this on the day that they announced the FDA approval, and then immediately the military comes in and says everybody's got to get vaccinated. Right, they're going to have the government come in. Everybody's got to get vaccine. De Blasio, we'll have more cold opens in the C block, so you can hear De Blasio and Meek and everybody literally dropping the hammer. But I want to go through. You're the expert. You're the inventor of the underlying technology of messenger RNA. Walk through just the documentation of the FDA approval, because this thing was fast march, not just from a year's process to what it took, but it was even supposed to be after Labor Day till this week, and because he needs to change the conversation. He needs to get back on CCP, out of Afghanistan, out of the economy, out of the southern border invasion, all of it that's spinning out of Arizona, about to drop the report on his illegitimacy in the state of Arizona and others. Just walk me through as technically as you can do it. You've gone through the FDA process many times. What was actually delivered yesterday, in your esteemed opinion, sir?
Thanks for that. This is a fascinating case of bureaucratic kind of shell game that the likes of which I haven't seen before. We actually have two distinct letters here. That's the first part. There's a letter for Pfizer and a letter for BioNTech. The New York Times and the Washington Post got it wrong. The authorization is not for Pfizer. The authorization is for BioNTech. And it will only be initiated at the time that BioNTech labeled product becomes available. Okay, so one of the things that I want your listeners to understand is that the liability coverage, the blanket coverage that allows Pfizer to not be liable for any adverse events only applies to the Pfizer product, which is still under emergency use authorization. They can only give that blanket authorization. And by the way, there's been no successful claims prosecuted under that for any compensation. They can only give that under emergency use authorization. So point number one for your listeners: if you're faced with a situation in which you have to accept vaccine, I strongly suggest that you hold off for the BioNTech commodity labeled product. That's the one that will have no longer have liability protection in the same way that the Pfizer emergency use authorization product does. One of the things that's fascinating here, I have to read this to you. In the letter to BioNTech, the FDA has decided to bypass the normal process of having an external advisory committee review their decisions and comment on it, which also requires a public comment period. This has always been done for any prior vaccine that I've ever been aware of. Here's what they say. We do not refer your applications to the Vaccines and Related Biologics Products Advisory Committee because our review of information submitted in your BLA, including the clinical study design and trial results, get this, did not raise concerns or controversial issues that it would have benefited from an advisory committee decision. So they've decided to just completely punt, and I humbly submit that there is a ton of controversy going on around these vaccines here in Europe, in Australia, et cetera. And this is another, I don't know what else to say, bold-faced lie, that there are no concerns or controversial issues, not the least of which in controversial issues is the cardiotoxicity, for which there are many, many studies now required. So what they've done here, I think, is jam through something that will enable the government and commercial entities and states to mandate vaccines to the military and otherwise. But they, by their own statements, they don't have the data to support the safety and efficacy claims. The efficacy claims that they do have are clearly outlined based on data that is completely outdated. It's based on the alpha and beta variants. I can go on. You want to?
Yeah, I do want you to go on, but yeah, I do want to jump in. Just hang here for 1 second. I just want to make sure we get this on the table. You've spent your career as a vaccinologist. You've spent your career working on vaccines. You're not an anti-vaxxer. You're actually pro-vaccine. In any one that you've ever worked on, or anyone that you know about, any vaccine that's gotten FDA approval, have you ever, in your memory, seen where they didn't have an outside advisory committee that took it, and there where they didn't have a time for public comment on said vaccine to the outside advisory committee? Have you ever seen that before?
Not in my memory or experience. And these committees are usually quite rigorous, although often stacked. So they don't even feel the need to go to their own hand-selected committees to comment. They're just saying, well, there's no controversy here. There's nothing to see, folks. Move on. And we're just going to go straight to authorization for the BioNTech product.
Would you be open to us putting together an advisory committee, and we'll make it even-handed? Obviously, we'll have you on it and actually have you guys opine to it and then have public comments. I mean, we would set up our site to get as many public comments as possible. If the government's not going to do it, maybe we should, if that's the normal process. I think a lot of people would feel better if this was run by normal Robert's Rules of Order. It looks like if saying the Navy, it looks like it's gun-decked, right? This thing feels like it's gun-decked. I'm not a professional, but people I've talked to overnight said there's something wrong with this process. And the data, I want to go back to the data. Are you saying the data that's attached that you can look at, you don't think deals with the Delta variant or any of the current variants? It deals with the original, and so therefore they're kidding themselves? Is that your point, that they haven't taken the most relevant,
That's
in particular what happened
true.
in Israel?
They haven't cited that. They cite the original studies that are quite outdated now. There's a bunch of other details in here. Some are not.
Hang on. I want to get to that after the commercial break.
Yeah, but in terms of your committee idea,
yeah.
Others are floating the same idea, and I think there's a great opportunity to bring together a consortium of interested parties to take this type of approach that you're proposing here.
Yeah. And what we'd want to do is make sure that there's the same level of caliber of expertise as the advisory committee the FDA has. We're not trying to say we're going to get all the anti-vax crowd. We want the same level of professionalism. Give us, whatever it is, a white paper. We'll work with it, and then have public comments.
The problem with this concept, and it's a great concept in theory if we had an open and transparent FDA and CDC. But normally the committee has access to data, and we will not have that access because they're still hiding it.
Well, this is kind of like the 3 November movement, right? Let's get to the facts first. Let's get to the receipts, then we'll see what the process does. We are data-based, evidence-based, and science-based. There are people out there that are fantasy-based. And Bill de Blasio, it's scary, the fantasy he's living. We told you, folks. We told you. On August 15th, when school starts going back, they're going to